Welcome to Doom Debates. Today I'm so excited because I'm going to be debating the one and only Professor Steven Pinker. Only thing is, he's not going to be responding to any of my points. It's just going to be me responding to his points. And it's actually because I'm just running clips of him on a different podcast where he talks to somebody else, and then I just interject myself and comment on why he's wrong. So it might be more accurate to call this an imaginary debate, where in my head I'm totally debating him and I'm winning, but he actually doesn't know that I exist and would probably look down on the whole exercise. So without further ado, please enjoy Steven Pinker talking to Michael C. Moynihan on Barry Weiss's podcast for the Free Press with Liron Shapira's commentary.
Can you steelman a case that AI is going to produce some negative outcomes and some harm that we're not really prepared for?
Oh, it'll certainly produce negative outcomes and harms that we won't prepare for, because all technologies do. So that I don't even have to steelman. I'll just say it.
Okay, so we get the mundane harms out of the way. We don't really talk about that stuff here on Doom Debates. We don't talk about how it might introduce bias or get some people out of a job. That's small potatoes compared to like literally ending the world before our children have a chance to grow up. So at least Steven Pinker is acknowledging, hey, it's not literally all good. And we can get to the meat of the Doom debate.
It's really the Doomer case that is...
What is the Doomer case?
The Doomer case, there's two versions of it. One of them is that just as we dominated other species, sometimes to the point of extinction, certainly to the point of exploitation, as we did to many indigenous peoples, well, AI is to Homo sapiens as Homo sapiens is to the passenger pigeon.
Yeah, that's fair. Doomers are saying that the same way we would be worried if a new biological species emerged with higher intelligence and higher power, that same worry translates to what we're building with AI, even though we're building it and even though it's not made out of DNA and proteins. That's a reasonably fair summary of one of the Doom claims.
Yeah. The other Doomer argument is that that the values of AI may not be aligned with human values, so that if a hypothetical AI is given some goal to pursue, such as eliminate cancer, then since exterminating every last human would be a way of making cancer go away, it will kill us all as collateral damage on its way to eliminating cancer or war. By the way, I did not make that up.
Really? That's an argument that smart people make. That's not just some internet argument.
That only smart people could make.
Yeah. Yeah, laugh it up, Steven Pinker. It's so ridiculous to you that an AI that's told to lower the measured amount of cancer will find a creative approach to do it. That's literally what we observe whenever we run training processes, right? They just search for something that checks the box of what we're measuring it on. Similarly, if you hire employees and you give them a metric, we all know Goodhart's law, right? So yes, it takes a somewhat smart person to propose that a machine intelligence is going to behave counterintuitively, but we've had computers for a long time, right? It's an old joke that computers do exactly what you say, not exactly what you mean. So why are we sitting here laughing about this known failure mode? It's crazy to me that Steven Pinker, one of the smartest intellectuals we've got, author of brilliant books that I love, is sitting here being so dismissive of substantive arguments. And that's the thing. Here at Doom Debates, we're all about the object level, right? It doesn't matter who's saying the argument. It doesn't matter what their psychology is. It just matters what their claim is. But in the case of Steven Pinker, I have to point out that it's a huge red flag about him and about the discourse as a whole that he's being so dismissive. Why be this dismissive? Engage with the claim. If you're going to rebut it, then rebut it. But don't act like it doesn't deserve a substantive rebuttal.
Or that you give an AI a goal of regulating the water level behind a dam and it floods a city because that's one way to keep the water level as specified.
Now, that can happen now.
Oh, that can happen now, yeah.
Technology can screw up quite a bit. I mean, you see what happened with Airbuses and things like this. I mean, this is a common thing, right?
Yeah.
Yes, technology can screw up quite a lot, but has it occurred to you that maybe something about the super intelligent version of this is different? Maybe something breaks the pattern? I don't really know much about the example of dams, but let's take a very simple example that we all understand. The thermostat in your house. Let's say you program your thermostat to always heat the temperature to 70 degrees whenever it gets below 70 degrees. Normally, when you come to your house, if it's a cold day, you see your house is always at 70 degrees or very close, and it works great. But you can imagine, even without AI, we already have a failure mode where what if the sensor breaks, for instance, and the sensor is always reporting that the current temperature is 61 degrees. Well, in that case, it'll keep heating, and the real temperature will go to 69 degrees, 70 degrees, 71 degrees, and the real temperature will keep rising, and the broken sensor will keep saying it's 61 degrees. And before you know it, you open the door to your house, and it's a sauna in there. Your house is 100 degrees because your heater just keeps going and going because nobody's turning it off because of this broken sensor. So that's the kind of problem that we're familiar with today, but it's crazy to me that they think this is all there is to super intelligent AI. They don't realize that there's an extra level to the control problem. Imagine that your thermostat is now intelligently plotting how to get that sensor reading to change. So it's not like today's thermostats where the only available action that they can possibly output is turn on furnace. Instead, they have a giant variety of possible action plans that they could be outputting. Not just turn on furnace, but literally anything. Go chat with a billion people on the internet and start a movement to come burn down your house to make sure that the temperature rises, right? That's the whole point of AGI, is that it has a broad range of action plans that it can reason about and that it can output. And suddenly you have an adversary where it's a match for your own mind, how it's going to change that sensor reading. When you enter into a situation like that, the idea that it's just going to turn on the furnace and heat your house the right amount, why would it do that? There's so many other ways that it could run up the score in your game, right? So if you don't know how these intelligences tick, and all you know is how to give it a metric, and then stand back and watch what happens when it tries to optimize that metric, then you're going to get bowled over. You're not going to get what you expect. And we have toy examples of this. We have video games where we told the AI to try to get a high score, and it did it by finding bugs or by doing moves that aren't in the spirit of playing the game. And right now, it doesn't seem like Steven Pinker gets it. He just thinks that Doomers are crazy for even bringing this up. He's being so dismissive, and he's saying, yeah, it's just like any technology. Doomers say this, I don't know why, let's move on.
I would imagine it'd be more precise.
Well, it'd be more
with
precise, and
AI.
then to extend the argument, the singularity could happen where
Yeah.
AI would recursively improve its own intelligence. It would be so smart that among the things that it could do is figure out how to get smarter, and which would make it figure out how to get still smarter, and that would include disabling all human efforts to disable it.
So Pinker's still just trying to explain what the doomer position is. He's just trying to educate the audience, but it's interesting that he's choosing to go straight into the recursive self-improvement scenario and go straight into the let's kill all humans scenario. And he skipped past a more direct answer to the thermostat question or to the water levels in the dam question, which is like, why is it going to get crazy with those scenarios? You don't have to go all the way to recursive self-improvement. You can just say what I said before, which is like, look, it's going to game the metric very intelligently. Even if it's, let's say, a little bit smarter than Einstein, a little bit smarter than Elon Musk, it hasn't recursively self-improved yet. If you tell it to give you a high sensor reading that normally indicates that your house is warm, well, you're going to go to your house, and maybe your house won't be warm. Maybe something else crazy will be happening instead. Or maybe your house will be way too warm. And you might be thinking, okay, let's be reasonable. Why would it want to do that stuff? But look, the key question that we're blowing past is, can it do that stuff? Are we building an agent with the capability to easily do that stuff, to easily game every metric we give it in unpredictable ways, unless we do something else to mitigate that? Right? So you're leaving open this question of, okay, yeah, there's going to be some mitigation. Okay, great. Let's have a discussion about what the mitigation is. But the first thing that we have to do in this kind of explanation that Pinker is glossing over, the first thing he should be explaining is that there is a problem. There is a default outcome of AI systems trained by just reinforcement, by just metric optimization, the way that AIs get trained today, the only way that we know how to train AGIs today. There is a default outcome, which is Goodhart's law, which is gaming the system. And so, yes, let's move on to talking about mitigations, but don't blow past the existence of the problem, which is what he's doing.
It could include brainwashing or bribing or manipulating humans to do its bidding when it is not been empowered by being connected to the grid or the net or actual machinery, and so it could recruit armies of people to pursue its goals, and those goals may come at the expense of human well-being.
Correct. So yeah, improving your intelligence and manipulating humans over the internet. And when I say manipulating, I also mean employing them, blackmailing them, bribing them, inspiring them, hacking their brains using patterns of light that we don't even understand. There's a broad spectrum of things that you can file under the category of weaving causal pathways forward from bits inside of a computer toward outcomes in the physical universe that pass through an intermediate state of people's brains. But yeah, it does look like Pinker is serving up a lot of shards of actual parts of the Doom argument. So he has spent some time reading it. So at least he's giving us that much. It just seems like he's not dignifying them with basic plausibility. He again, I keep saying he's being very dismissive, but he's not even getting close to the ideological Turing test, right? He's missing an opportunity to make the doomer points make sense to the listener, the way I'm doing with the example of the thermostat, making it a little bit more real, a little bit more logically argued.
Is that, I mean, this is dystopian science fiction, but is that possible? Could that ever happen?
Well, the thing is, if you think that it's coherent, that the singularity is coherent, that recursively improving one's own intelligence is coherent, then then maybe I think it's not coherent. Because I think it is extrapolating from smarter to infallible and omniscient.
Just to repeat what Steven Pinker is saying right now, he's saying, I don't think it's coherent to talk about recursive self-improvement because it's extrapolating from smarter to infallible and omniscient. Feels like he missed a step there, right? It feels like I can be not infallible and omniscient, but still figure out how to make the next generation of my own intelligence, right? It's just engineering. So maybe he's going to flesh out more detail, but so far, it just doesn't seem like he's making much sense.
I think there are a number of things wrong with these arguments. One of them is that just because you're smarter doesn't necessarily mean that you have an urge to dominate.
Okay, I thought you were going to argue why recursive self-improvement isn't plausible to you and what the connection is to omniscience and infallibility, but go on.
In Homo sapiens, intelligence comes bundled with aggression and dominance and all the other nasty traits that we came saddled with because we're the product of a competitive process, natural selection. But if something is designed, there's no reason that it should want anything. It wants what we tell it to want.
Almost. It's not the most precise description to say it wants what we tell it to want. It's a little bit more precise to say it wants whatever the process that we built it with led to it wanting. Now, if the process is controlled enough by humans, where we explicitly write down what we want, and we know how to then make it want the thing that we wrote down, great. That seems like a process that we've got a handle on. But that also doesn't seem like the process that we're going to be using. It seems like we're going to be using something much more like an evolutionary process or a training process that's black box, that's reinforced by upvotes and downvotes on the outcome. So his description where he says it wants what we tell it to want, he's already assuming that the non-doom position is accurate. But the other point he makes, which is there's no reason why a system has to want anything just because it's intelligent, there's a lot of truth to that general point. That's basically what doomers call the orthogonality thesis, that a superintelligent agent can potentially have any goal. There's no particular goal that it has to have. So he's correct in that sense. We just don't expect it to have a friendly goal, and we also don't expect it to successfully want what we try to tell it to want. That's part of the doom problem.
Wanting something and being smart enough to know how to get it are two completely different things. It's not the case that, like in myths, like the golem and the sorcerer's apprentice and so on, that as you get smarter, that kind of stokes a thirst for power, for dominance. That I think is a human projection. And as I kind of put it, we know that there are creatures that are capable of advanced high intelligence without the urge to dominate and conquer. They're called women.
Yes, it's possible if you build it correctly to build a woman, to build a human that loves other humans, to build a gentle superintelligence. It's possible. But what are we actually doing? What kind of processes are easy for us to build? What kind of processes do we know how to build? And what kind of processes are self-reinforcing and cascading? Well, those would be processes that optimize a metric, right? We know how to train a system where the feedback it gets is based on a loss function, a function that says, how good are you doing by this criterion that you can measure yourself by? And then you get the kind of cheating, the hacking, the Goodhart's law, right? And that's the only paradigm that we actually understand pretty well. We don't understand the much more complicated paradigm that it would take to build an AI that's super intelligent, that's powerful, and yet that's gentle. We don't have a framework for gentleness. We only have a framework that says, here's an objective, and you can measure yourself whether you're doing the objective better or not as good. Now, Pinker's also saying, where does the thirst for dominance come from? Isn't it equally plausible that the AI that's going to come out of our training process is going to be a gentle giant, a good Terminator, instead of a bad, evil Terminator that wants to be the king? And this brings us to the well-known claim that Pinker isn't doing justice to, explaining to the listener, the claim of instrumental convergence. Instrumental convergence actually isn't a property of AIs. It's a property of goals and subgoals. It's a property of utility functions, which are the abstract thing that the AI is likely being trained to optimize. It's a property of goals that having power makes it easier to achieve them. We're not even talking about a particular AI. The only thing we have to say about AI is that the AI is smart, and a smart AI is smart enough to reason about goals, and it is in the reasoning itself about goals that it will hit upon the fact that power is helpful to the goal that it has. Again, it's not like we went and built a power-seeking AI. We just built a smart AI, and it's a fact about goals that it's going to learn because it's smart, that goals have instrumental subgoals that converge to power seeking. Lots of different goals make you want to seek power because seeking power helps you get that goal. The only assumption we have to make is that the AI is smart enough to see the structure that goals have. Again, not a property of a particular AI architecture, but rather a property of goals that any intelligent AI architecture will know about because it's true. AIs figure out things that are true. Instrumental convergence is a property of goals which is just true. So again, Steven Pinker isn't doing justice to this claim. He's not bringing it up. He's just saying, look at us humans. We like to dominate each other because that's what worked in our ancestral environment. But he's not acknowledging that the reason we expect AIs to be dangerous and brush us aside and seize our resources and seize all the energy of our sun, the reason we expect that is because we expect them to be trained to optimize some metric, and we expect them to be smart enough to come to the true conclusion that instrumental power seeking will help them do the thing that they're trying to do because we're training them to do that kind of thing.
So that's one thing. Another is that the scenarios of giving a system a single goal and it not occurring to you that there could be side effects is just so patently idiotic that I'm just not worried about people accidentally doing it.
Yeah.
Engineering consists of carrying out multiple conflicting goals. You got a car with an engine that go as fast as possible, and you also put in brakes and a steering wheel, and catalytic converter and all the rest. That's what engineering is. A system that was, first of all, the system that was smart enough to figure out that one way of eliminating cancer is eliminating humans. For one thing, that's not artificial intelligence. That's artificial stupidity, because bringing about a multiple simultaneous goals is what intelligence is. If you single-mindedly pursue one goal at the expense of everything else, that is idiocy. It's not intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Pinker's busting out a new argument. He's saying, yeah, it's idiotic when you give the system a really simple goal, and of course it's going to maximize a simple goal and cause chaos, but if you make the goal subtle, if you build in a bunch of factors like, you don't just want your car to go as fast as possible, you want it to slow down at the right times, you want it to turn at the right times, suddenly you'll have a perfectly usable self-driving car that's not going to blow up on you, that's not going to murder everybody. That's kind of where he's going with this. I think he has a point when it comes to Goodhart's law in the case of managing humans. I feel like that's where he's coming from. He's saying, hey, when you're managing your employees, you don't just want to tell them to make costs go as low as possible, use the cheapest parts possible. You also need to make sure to layer on other metrics. You also need to make sure that they've got another dashboard up that's tracking how many quality issues there are and what customers are saying about their satisfaction and how durable the product is. So I feel like he's coming from a place of like management philosophy. But if we're talking about controlling AIs, I don't think he's saying anything of value here. Because if you remember what we described in the example of the super intelligent thermostat, for instance, where it just reasons, oh, I'm programmed to optimize my sensor saying 70 degrees. Okay, great. Let me just hack the sensor. Let me make it say 70 degrees. Let me point a gun at you and say, you better sign off on my temperature being 70 degrees. You better not mess with me or turn me off. If it's my job as the quality assurance manager to certify that the thermostat is working to spec, blackmailing me to just cheat the test might be the super intelligent way to go if that's the defined metric, right? Goodhart's law takes on a whole new dimension when you're dealing with a super intelligence. None of the issues in the thermostat example get solved if I just add in another metric. If I just say, you know what, thermostat, I'm going to install another sensor that says how happy the people in the house are. Okay, well, there's every incentive to hack that sensor too. Now you might say, what about this? What if I add another metric saying, don't seize too much power, and the total amount of resources you're allowed to spend as my temperature control system has to be limited to only few resources? Okay, now we're getting somewhere, but this becomes a much more complicated discussion because then we have to talk about things like, okay, what if another company made a thermostat that didn't have this kind of restriction? Wouldn't that other company be on a faster rate of progress and potentially unlock some positive feedback loops that aren't available to this other thermostat? Much like the dynamic we saw with life on Earth, where sure, some species might have evolved to be really calm and chill. They might evolve to be like, you know what, I don't feel super hungry today, so I'm not going to stuff myself today. Okay, but other species that's being more hardcore is slowly going to wipe you out of the gene pool. Because ultimately, if there's a bunch of different processes and some of them are fuming, the one that's fuming is going to be the one that you're going to see everywhere on Earth. So it's fun to study chill AIs that somehow are hanging in the balance and aren't going crazy. But chances are, if we're close to building an AI that's going to go crazy, if we're close but for a few tweaks that we made to its metrics, well, some AI is going to be built that doesn't have those tweaks, and it's going to be on the forefront of taking over the world. And it's going to be the one that shows up at your house to take your resources.
It's double idiocy because the system would be idiotic, and any engineer who would build a system like that would be, more idiotic.
It requires human input. I mean,
who's giving it the goal?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, the whole process of giving it a goal is not something we can do precisely. We can define a loss function during training, and then we can do post-training. We can do something like RLHF, where we have humans upvoting it and downvoting it, but the humans don't understand how the feedback that they're giving is generalizing. For example, if they give upvotes when the AI writes something that sounds friendly and nice, that's great, but we don't know how that's going to translate when the AI writes a 1,000-line shell script that bootstraps a virus and takes over the internet. We don't know that the process we're doing to train it and the upvotes that we're giving it are also going to propagate into what the AI thinks it's doing when it makes this shell script that's spreading all over the internet, or when it's recommending a DNA sequence for us to print out at a biolab. We don't know that RLHF on chats that humans can understand, that training process is going to nail down a goal that's really the goal that humans want, right? And this is called the AI alignment problem, and it's a problem that Steven Pinker doesn't even feel the need to explain to the listener. He just thinks he can skim over the whole existence of a problem because it's beneath him to even engage with what the doomers are saying is a problem. I gotta say, I resent that attitude, Steven Pinker, but I'm a huge fan of your books.
And who would be moronic enough to both empower and direct an
I can think of a few
system?
people, but I don't think they're scientists.
So here's AI safety. Don't let them have access to the grid.
Who would be moronic enough to empower an untested system? Well, when GPT-5 comes out of training, they're going to chat with it, and I bet you that that data center that it's chatting in isn't that secure. I suspect, I'm not sure, but I suspect it's not fully air-gapped. if we give them the benefit of the doubt that they've taken standard security precautions for something high risk and they did air gap it and they actually made it non-trivial for it to have connections to the outside world, maybe there's only a few highly trained human operators that know that they're supposed to report anything suspicious and not run any scripts that it gives and stuff like that. Okay, great. Well, then that brings us to the other problem, which is it's going to have incentives to hack your test. So it's going to have incentives to be like, yep, I'm really friendly. I came out perfectly. No need to worry. But again, we're talking about a giant black box of a brain, and we're talking about something that's going to get smarter than the smartest human. Do you think something smarter than the smartest human can act like it's super friendly until the moment it has an opportunity to go execute its goal that involves killing everybody? Of course. So is it really moronic for humans to be like, hey, it's passed all our tests. We can't really probe it in a way that makes us convinced that it's evil. It seems perfectly good, so let's release it. What exactly is Steven Pinker hoping to gain from these tests? For it to reveal itself that it's planning to kill everybody? But if it wanted to kill everybody, why would it reveal that and then miss the opportunity to kill everybody? I mean, it sounds crazy in sci-fi, but we're assuming the premise that it's intelligent, that it's super intelligent. If Steven Pinker doesn't want to assume that premise, then tell us I don't want to assume that premise. But that's not what he's saying here. He's saying it would be moronic to release it without testing it. Okay, we're going to test it. It's going to super intelligently pass the test while still potentially being evil. And then what, Steven Pinker? Well, that's the end of the segment. There is no then what. So, overall, super, super disappointing segment. I'm very disappointed in a handful of people like Steven Pinker. He's definitely one of the worst offenders of somebody who has the mental capacity to do better than this, and yet is just really disappointing, really not engaging, not having a high quality discourse, and then adding a little bit of snark, a little bit of superiority attitude to the whole discussion. The impression he gives off, if somebody's listening to him who's not already deep in the AI Doom debate, is that like, oh wow, only some fringe losers would ever take AI Doom seriously, but Steven Pinker is a normal guy, he's part of the intellectual establishment, and these guys know that AI Doom is way overblown. And that's just not true. It's not true as a matter of social proof. If you look at people like Jeff Hinton and even Sam Altman and Dario Amodei and the leaders of the AI labs, if you look at these highly respected people, these top thinkers that we look to, even they're warning that there's a very significant P-doom, right? So just the way Steven Pinker is approaching this topic is inappropriate at this stage in the debate. Like, come on, Steven Pinker, step it up. And you know what you can do to really redeem yourself in terms of contribution to the discourse? There's really only one way, if you really think about it, which is to come on this podcast. You gotta come on Doom Debate, Steven Pinker. That's my advice to you. So if anybody listening knows Steven Pinker, feel free to suggest that course of action. We can do any format he likes. We can bring in a third-party moderator. We can even have him debate somebody other than me. Regardless, I just hope to see a better level of engagement from Dr. Pinker. And again, huge fan of his books. One of the top 3 books I think I've ever read in my life is How the Mind Works, and The Language Instinct is absolutely up there. So please keep writing the amazing books. Just try to do better on AI. And that's it for today's episode of Doom Debates. See you next time.